Now's the time for questions, okay? And there's a lot to answer, so thank you. Okay, over to John. Can you hear me, John? Oh, right. Sorry. Oh, I don't think you can hear me.
On mute. Oh yes, I was on mute. I was mute.
Sorry. Okay.
So yeah, that was a very wide-ranging discussion. It's difficult to know where to begin. I think Beth asked the question, you know, what do we do when the water wars break out? Yes, I mean, that's one of the things about the capitalist class. Rather than deal with climate change, they're going to fight over the scraps, like India and China are fighting over the water. So they're having this big, you know, they're massing troops in the watershed of the major rivers of Asia, starting in Tibet and in the Himalayas. And so the Chinese and the Chinese and the Indians are at daggers drawn there. And this is the, you know, part of the irrationality of capitalist imperialism, is that they want to, you know, fight over the ever diminishing spoils of capitalism, of the, you know, world they've created. So, you know, the other question is, you know, what do we do when the shit hits the fan in the way it already has started to hit the shit has already started to hit the fan? You know, we should ask ourselves, you know, it's not the first time revolutionaries have been faced with this sort of crisis. When the Bolsheviks, you know, in Russia, following the First World War, there was a total economic collapse. The food production collapsed, industrial production collapsed. And a group of women textile workers said, enough, we're not going to put up with this anymore. And they had a demonstration protest in February of 1917, protesting about the rising price of bread. You know, I think capitalism is the climate crisis is going to create similar conditions that existed after the First World War. People will not have enough bread. People will be flooded because of climate change. People will not have enough water, or they'll be sweating to death because of the deadly heat waves. And people will protest, and we will need to respond the same way the Bolsheviks respond. While the crisis is happening, you know, while Rome burns, sort of in Nero style, Richard Branson is having his ego flight over the horizon, you know, trying to escape the Earth's gravity. And this is the kind of decadent capitalist class we have, you know, running the system. You know, Caroline says, however bad it seems to get, it doesn't seem to change the governments. Yeah, I mean, what governments do not respond to reason or evidence. They respond to class interests. So, and we've seen this with our government and COVID-19, is that they ignore the scientific, what is prudently sensible to do. And they said, oh, people can do whatever they like now. And we're going to end the lockdown, regardless of whether it's going to lead to an exploding rate of infections, because they put the interests of business and capital accumulation above our lives. They will sacrifice our lives to save the profits of capital. They're doing it over COVID. They will do this over climate change. We know that. What is going to change things is pressure from below, the revolt from below. That is what's going to change things. You mentioned the COP26 in Glasgow. I think that is, you know, very, very important for us. That's an opportunity for the climate movement, the climate justice movement in Britain to come together and say the world's governments are lying to us. They're deceiving us. They're saying they're going to come up with a deal in Glasgow, but they're not going to come up with a deal because the whole thing is a big public relations exercise. Greta Thunberg saying they're going to make all these commitments to zero carbon by 2050, zero net carbon. But the problem isn't zero net carbon by 2050. The question is what we do in the next 5 to 10 years. We need to be going net zero in 5 to 10 years, not in 40 years. It's too late. What they're proposing is far too late. And, you know, we need to shout that out from the rooftops. Tim talked about overthrowing capitalism. Yes, of course, we're socialists, we're revolutionaries, we argue for the overthrow of capitalism. But we don't simply abstractly mouth, yes, the answer is the overthrow of capitalism. What we do is we point in the direction of the overthrow of capitalism. We argue for it, and everything we do is directed towards the overthrow of capitalism. And how is it directed? Well, I think we need to consider that every protest, every revolution starts with a protest. The February Revolution started with a protest. We had a wave of protests in 2019. People might have forgotten it already. In the Sudan, before the lockdown, in Chile, in Lebanon, and in a few other places I forget. There was a whole wave of protest and revolt against the current system and the current priorities of the capitalist class. And I think that's the direction we need to look. It's not seeing climate change and climate justice as some separate issue, which is disconnected from other aspects of people's lives, but as something that is integral and central to how we live our lives, how we eat, where we sleep, how we work, how we travel to work. These are all connected issues. And so I think what the mistake that sort of NGOs make when they look at something like climate change is they abstract it and partition it away from all other aspects of our lives, but it is connected with everything else about capitalism. And so therefore, what we need is a horizon that revolutionaries can give to people, a perspective that we as revolutionaries can give to people is, how are we going to change the system? How, we are, the capitalist class, as Kevin said, makes us feel atomized and powerless. But when we come together, we are powerful, we can change things. And I think we've seen even today, just this week with the way people responded to the racist trolling of the England football players, how very quickly the culture war that the Tories had launched against anti-racists. Remember, Priti Patel was supporting people who booed England football players who take the knee. All of a sudden, they are thrown onto defensive because of the massive response and anger of ordinary people, and saying we're not going to put up with it, racist trolling of, the England football team. We're not accepting it, and we're not going to allow it. And all of a sudden, the government is thrown onto the defensive, and they are exposed for what they are, which is a bunch of opportunist right-wing thugs, basically, or at least not thugs themselves, but people who enable and give through their dog whistle politics confidence to people who are racist thugs. So I think the other point that we mentioned is, Pete, the Tories have, I think when we talk about, alternatives, people are, younger generation is looking towards alternatives to capitalism. And it's very interesting and instructive, I think, that the Tories have banned discussion of alternatives to capitalism in schools. I don't think that's an accident. And for us, the question is, as Lenin put it, is what is to be done. And I think we can learn a lot from Lenin on how we, respond to the climate justice movement, how we can focus on what are the key links in the chain in any given situation, focus on what the key links. And the key links in the chain is the chain of revolution, the chain that connects events to a revolution. And I think we need to talk about revolution and the overthrow of capitalism, and not talk about it as something which is distant and abstract, but it's something we do every day through our activity. We're always looking to the horizon. We may be taking steps or baby steps, but our eyes are always on the horizon. We're looking towards the horizon of revolution. And what we need to do is integrate all the steps, everything we do in the here and now, the day-to-day struggle, connect that with the project of the revolutionary overthrow of capitalism. I don't think that is abstract or far-fetched. It's Lenin taught us how to do that, how to connect the day-to-day struggle of revolutionaries, of climate activists, to the overall program and project of the overthrow of capitalism. And that's about having those arguments with people, being part of the mobilization for against COP26 and its failures. It's about putting forward concrete alternatives. As people mentioned, Jonathan Neal, former comrade, wrote a very good book. We are involved in writing with the trade unions, the Million Climate Jobs pamphlet. Calling for revolution isn't being abstract. It's being concrete and talking about the issues of the day now, because these are all the key links in the chain, and that's something Lenin taught us. How to be revolutionaries and how to be concrete at the same time. People talked about, I think Mary talked about zoonotic pandemic, systemic thing. As I said before, in the current situation, it's very, very volatile. We can see from day to day how the fortune of the governments change. On one day, the Boris Johnson looks unassailable and high up on the polls, and then the next day he looks vulnerable and retreating. And it shows you, I think, the protests against the racist trolling of the football players this week shows you how they can be thrown onto the defensive very, very quickly. And they are not as invulnerable as they seem. I think they are vulnerable to attack. They are vulnerable to us mounting attack. If we can get united and organized, we can push them back. We can push them back on their rogue program. We can force them to stop oil and gas exploration. We're putting forward the arguments here and now, how to stop the climate crisis, stop all new fossil fuel oil and gas infrastructure, stop this £26 billion road program, institute free public transport, free buses, make sure that homelessness is ended and that people have sustainable homes which do not, which are zero carbon. These are all things arguments we can put forward in the day-to-day. And revolutionaries, what revolutionaries do is point the day, connect the day-to-day daily issues that people face and connect that to the overall project of the overthrow of capitalism. I think I have answered everyone's question. I think I have. I think I'll just leave it at there. I think I have addressed all the main points, and I'll leave it at that.